Chapter 25 Despair. Requiem was leaning against the stone arch entrance to the main high street, admiring the streak of melted grass and mud he had left in his wake after surfing the hill, as Freya skipped in, rosy-cheeked and full of energy. "Ha ha! Gio is so going to lose," she decreed triumphantly as she readjusted her clothing from sport to urban. They looked back up the hill, but could see no sign of Uracil or Gio. "That's odd," said Freya, standing on tiptoe to get a better look. "You can understand not seeing Uracil. He has the side profile of a twig. But Gio, you can see from space. So why can't we see anything now?" Requiem was not worried. He could see both of their auras collapsed and crawling through the grass on their hands and knees. Every time Uracil gained some ground, Gio grabbed his leg and pulled him behind, only for Uracil to climb over Gio to take the lead in what looked like an unfit elephant and a whippet race. Finally, it dawned on Uracil that he needn't play by the usual rules. Grabbing 2 handfuls of grass, he turned them into a large inflatable ball and rolled down the hill, being flung about inside like washing in a tumble dryer. As the ball rammed into the wall, a dizzy Uracil was greeted by the sarcasm of Requiem. "Well done. Who would have thought to use conversion? I mean, it's not like we're a race of people built upon this unique ability or anything, is it?" Uracil could see Requiem's point, but took comfort in the fact that Gio was still floundering breathlessly down the hill. The fact that he could turn the hill into a water slide, or cover it in snow, was apparently barred from entering Gio's mind. "Gio, how can you be so strong yet so unfit?" asked Freya, genuinely concerned when Gio finally joined them, breathlessly wiping his heavily sweating brow. "I'm not unfit," he said, still breathless. "I just don't measure my fitness on the same scale as you, that's all. On my scale, I can eat 2 donuts and a cream cake and still have the energy to sleep. That takes intensive training, you know." Requiem looked up at the sky with a smirk. "It's getting dark. We won't make it to despair and damnation before nightfall at this rate." Uracil's eagerness to avoid the wolves was all too apparent. "Why don't we spend the night here? I'm sure we can find a pleasant place to stay on the high street." Requiem let his head drop nonchalantly towards Uracil. "I don't think they'll let me in somehow." "That's okay. You can sleep outside. You can't put a price on the safety of others, you know." "And where does my safety factor come into this, being left to sleep on the street in a hostile city?" "As the person who wants to take us to the jaws of hell, I think it is your duty to be the one persecuted. All those in favour?" Uracil raised his arm and looked to his friends for support. Calmly, Freya pulled Uracil's arm back down. "Don't be so silly, Uracil. We'll find a way for all of us to stay safe tonight." "Aha, and I think I found the way," called Gio eagerly. He was standing further down the city wall, where he had found an abandoned old car. "If we take this, we should make better time. As a bonus, I don't think wolves can open car doors, so we should all be safe." The group walked over to investigate Gio's find. Requiem went to open the driver's side door to get a better look inside, only for it to come off in his hand. Uracil peered at the car suspiciously and tapped the back window to test its sturdiness. It failed the test, resoundingly as it proceeded to fall and smash, after which everyone looked at Gio disapprovingly. "What? It's a classic. It's supposed to do that," he said, responding to their silent "No." A huge grin consumed Requiem. "A classic, huh? Now, I may not be able to make a machine from scratch, but modifications, now those I can do." Everyone stood back as Requiem took energy from the surroundings. The air rushed in on itself, turning to fog as frost covered its wake, dusting the grass and causing the walls to creak as ice set into its cracks. Before their very eyes, the dishevelled wreck of a car was transformed. The wheels melted and gave way to huge, deep-dish alloys on the rear with smaller ones on the front, giving the car an aggressive prowling stance. The suspension dropped so the car was barely off the ground, forcing plumes of dust into the air and the remaining windows to fall in and smash gloriously as the Phoenix rose. The rusting body gave way to black carbon fibre with flared arches and skirts, giving the car a sharp aerodynamic shape. The front of the car caved in, and a vast, hungry, gleaming silver grille emerged. The headlights sank into the body, transforming from chunky rectangles to fierce teardrops. Meanwhile, something akin to a scorpion's tail arched over the back and towards the roof, holding a spoiler large enough to allow a plane to take flight. The rear lights turned into points as two chrome twin exhausts chased up the back. For a touch of cool comfort, the tatty velour and plastic interior crumbled as the new, sharp, red leather racing attire forced its way into existence. And now for the crowning glory! A loud grating sound of metal against metal drew everyone's bewildered but admiring gaze to the middle of the bonnet. More thuds, and yet more dents had Uracil quietly backing away for fear of some untamed beast clawing its way through the bonnet. All of a sudden, the land fell eerily quiet, drawing everybody's attention to the twig snapping from Uracil's sheepish retreat. As Uracil cringed, the beast seized its opportunity and thrust its triangular air intake out through the bonnet with such ferocity that the front wheels left the ground, and Uracil momentarily fainted. The engine roared ferociously, fire bursting from its exhausts as the intake rattled in its holdings, desperately trying to break out. The Phoenix was reborn, and the beast was clearly hungry as it growled, rocking from side to side, desperate to be let loose on the roads. "Right, I think we should make good time in this," declared Requiem, clearly pleased with his handiwork, as Uracil reappeared cautiously from under his hood. Gio walked over to Uracil and lifted him to his feet by the scruff of his neck, before shepherding him over to the driver's door. As he reached for the handle, the beast roared and doors rushed upwards on hinges attached to the roof, sending Uracil flying. Gio was impressed, but what mattered most to him was legroom. Seeing that Freya had rushed to his side and that the bookworm would live another day, Gio watched in awe as the driver's seat slid out of the car and up towards the front wheel, giving him all the space he could ever want. Eagerly, he jumped into the back and made himself comfortable as the driver's seat travelled back in. Deceptively spacious," he declared, switching to a more sarcastic tone as he pressed a panel on the end of the seat. "Ooh, and look, little cup holders. You really have thought of everything." Gently guided by Freya, who was giving the beast a glare that could kill at 20 paces, Uracil flopped onto the seat next to Gio. The seat was warm and soft and gave him a relaxing massage as he came to his senses. "He's right, you know. The fat one fits, and there is still room to breathe. And, yes, an armrest. Ah, heaven." Uracil had clearly forgiven the beast for its brutish entrance and sly attack, as he saw that on the inside it was a good car. Silently, Freya looked at Requiem. As if they had read each other's minds, they both suddenly turned for the open driver's door. But Requiem didn't stand a chance. Before he could take a second breath, Freya was in the driver's seat attaching the 4-point harness as it adjusted automatically to the perfect driving position. Grabbing the red leather steering wheel with little black driving gloves she hadn't been wearing a moment ago, Freya grinned manically as she watched the digital dash flash into life with every thundering roar of the beast. "I'll direct, shall I?" said Requiem, disgruntled, as he made his way to the passenger seat. He had to hand it to her, though. There was no way he could have made driving gloves that fast. "No, I'll direct. You don't know where you're going," replied Gio, poking his head between the front seats. "Besides, after what you managed to do in France, we'd end up in orbit if we let you drive." "Yes, I agree," added Uracil, who was casually draped over the large armrest. "It's about time we had someone sensible in the driver's seat." Freya gave a wild grin, bordering on insanity, as she gripped the steering wheel tightly, rammed it into gear, dropped the clutch, and took flight. Gio's cheeks were forced towards the back window, making it hard for him to turn to Urasil as he said, "You call this sensible?" Urasil's chest was slowly caving in under the G-force as he strained to reply, "You may have a point. However, if this were Requiem, we'd be dead by now." Freya made a handbrake turn, leaving Urasil's stomach somewhere in a nearby tree as she burst onto the main high street in a fanfare of smoke, flames, and burning rubber. "Left! You're going the wrong way!" shouted Gio. "Oh, hang on," said Freya, clearly distracted by having too much fun to really care where she was headed. The smooth cobbled road made it difficult for the beast to gain traction. It did, however, allow for daring on-the-spot turns, and it was not long before Freya had spun them around and was careering down the high street. There were not many cars on the road. There just didn't seem to be a technology that people of the religious quarter were interested in. Instead, the road was littered with people, horses, and carriages. The scene harked back to Dickensian London in many ways, but instead of being lined with shops and townhouses, the high street was packed with churches, mosques, and all manner of temples and establishments of prayer. The architecture was breathtaking, as Western Gothic lines met the curves of the Middle East and the pyramids of Egypt. Thankfully, none of these structures were small, making for a very wide street. Freya had immense fun slipping and sliding through the populace as the beast roared, snarled and screeched, fire constantly bursting from its back. A resigned call of, "Oh dear," could just about be heard from Gio in the back. "Oh dear," said Requiem patronisingly as he turned to look back at Gio. "Well, you see—" "Sorry, can't hear you. You're going to have to shout." "In short, the main high street, fitted gates, the bearing road." Requiem forced his head back to look at Freya. "What did he say?" Freya asked, craning her neck towards Requiem. "Look for short gates on a boring road." By now, Urasil, who would normally be in a state of befuddled alarm, was being massaged to within seconds of sleep and could only vaguely register what was going on. But the miscommunication somehow registered on his consciousness. No, he said that there are gates to the bearing road." A muffled sound came from the back. "And they close at night?" repeated Urasil, not realising the gravity of what he was saying. Requiem was dismissive. "We'll be sure to get there before then." Urasil sat back to find Gio pointing frantically. "Ah," said Gio, now also in resignation. Freya did not need a translation. In front of her were two large stone gates, each of which was being pushed closed by at least 20 men. Requiem shouted, "Brace yourselves!" He turned to Freya. "There's a 5-second delay," he said, and pressed the hazard warning lights button before sitting bolt upright in his seat. "I don't need warning lights, I need—" Freya could not finish the sentence. Nitrous flooded into the engine. So much air was sucked in by the beast that vapour trails could be seen leading into the grill and intakes. An eruption followed that any volcano on Earth would have been proud of. Smoke filled the high street as the beast's tyres span furiously. Finally, they gained traction, and the beast launched itself forwards, its vast scorpion tail barely keeping them grounded. The beast shot through the closing gates at such speed that several of the men were sucked into the other side. They screamed frantically as they got to their feet and raced back to safety, sealing the gates shut. There was no going back. Not that they could turn back, since the beast had gained so much inertia that all Freya could do was keep it steady,